Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Friday night live stream here on the Sergeant Tank Pets YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about growing in the fish keeping hobby, and if you're interested in do-it-yourself projects, or maybe even want to learn how to breed certain species of fish, then I suggest that you go ahead and turn on that notification bell and make sure that you're subscribed. Go ahead, give it a like and a share. The main thing is planning. So planning. And there's a couple of different options that you have when it comes to planning. Now, do you plan on doing this within, let's say, your home, some type of dwelling? Do you plan on doing it in a greenhouse? Do you plan on doing it in a pole barn or a shed or something like that? So there's a lot of different options that you have. And you have to understand certain ordinances in that, too, in order to comply with the laws and regulations and maybe any stipulations that may be in place based on where you're doing it. Now, if you're in an apartment or even a duplex or even a condo, there may be a lot of stipulations there where it may hinder based on, let's say, through insurance and all of that and the potential for liability. So there's a lot of things that go into it besides just planning. That's all part of, besides just planning for, okay, this is how many tanks I want, this type of rack system I want. I hear people always talking about that stuff, but they don't think about the liability point of view when it comes to it. Electrical, plumbing, hiring in the right people, contractors, if you really plan on going and doing it right. There's a lot of different things that you need, certain permitting in that if you plan on doing some restructuring within the home or adding on different electrical panels and that type of thing. Now, when it comes to deciding on your area, so identifying the area for which you want to start the fish room. So I'm going to use an example for us, such in a basement where I have concrete. Obviously, we live in Michigan. We have basements. A lot of places don't have basements, so you would have to plan elsewhere. Now, if you plan on a main level or even in anything elevated, obviously structural integrity is the most important. You have to realize that the amount of weight and can that wall handle that amount of weight, or can that subfloor or the footings handle the amount of weight that you plan on putting on there. So from an engineering point of view, there's a lot that also goes into it as well. So let's say you've talked to maybe some contractors, you've talked to other people who have fish rooms. You kind of have it in your mind of how many tanks you want. There's many different options when it comes to tanks. All really depends on your interest, depending on breeding. I myself personally like 40 breeders and 20 longs. Those would be my go-to, and even 10 gallons within a fish room because of what I breed. Now, if you're breeding larger species of certain cichlids or something like that, then you may very well have to go up to larger systems for grow-outs. The other thing that oftentimes I hear is, now do you use some type of customized rack system? So whether if that be you build it yourself, have somebody else build it for you, to customize it to your liking. And that's fine. I myself like the opportunity for versatility. And I can tell you, I can almost guarantee you, if you're brand new getting a fish room, 5-10 years from now, I can guarantee it, 99% of the time, your interest within the hobby will change depending on what species you're keeping at that point, within a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10, so on and so forth. I myself have done both ways. I myself within our fish rooms have it both ways. If I would change one thing, I would invest into doing some type of modular style rack system, whether if that be at Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, you order it, just because of the fact of versatility. The amount of return on investment or the amount of resale value, essentially you could sell that entire system as a whole through a local club, through Marketplace, on Craigslist, to another, to a friend, family, whatever it is. So the investment up front, and then let's say you decide 5 years later you want to sell. It's going to be a lot easier for you to go ahead and sell maybe as an entire rack system. You could split it off if you wanted to. So there's a lot of different options there for you. So my recommendation from having a fish room for over 13 years is the fact that if I would change one thing, I would have made that initial investment up front. Because trying to work around customized systems can be very difficult. Now, if you're planning a business to where it's a, let's say it's a wholesale business, or if it's a farm type of business, or whatever the case might be there, then it may be wise to have customized systems. But for the average aquarist, most of us here aren't doing things at that level because of the amount of cost and the investment. Then I would look at it differently. Mine would be more VATS type of setups, that type of thing, versus just, glass aquariums. So hopefully that makes sense. So now you've decided, you've gone through your planning stage. You decided whether if you want to do custom, not do custom, depending on the location. You've gone through all the legality aspects of it. Now with electrical. So without going too much into depth with electrical, the number one thing that, whether if you have 1 tank or 100, you need to be utilizing a ground fault circuit interrupter. I hear more and more and more and more horror stories about a heater bursting or something like that happening. I can tell you my life has been spared multiple times, as well as the life of my fish or livestock that I'm keeping. Never once I've had live hot wires drop directly while I'm actively involved in that system, instantly trips. So don't get confused with a surge protector. Get rid of that garbage. No surge protector. They're useless. They're junk. Get a ground fault circuit interrupter. The ones that I recommend, the ones that we've sold on our website that I've been testing and using for years, they're actually, you can get them at Home Depot. Less than $15, you can run essentially an entire fish room off from one of those. And I've tested it. You can get between 12 and 1400 continuous wattage on a standard 15 amp circuit using one of those default for like $12.97. They're a portable unit, and you can do a GFCI where it's you can have an electrician come in and install it hardwired into your system that way. But these do just as good of a job as those other ones. And I don't know why everybody's not using it. That will, in almost all cases, 99% of the time, there's that 1% chance that there may be some issues there if the product was defective or whatever the case might be. But I've used them multiple times, and I have multiple ones running. Never once have I ever had an issue. So I can put my stamp of approval on it. But I'm just telling you, you should always be acting, obviously, with good common sense and good judgment. Don't do those things that I mentioned. Do as I say and not as I do. Obviously, having live hot wires that are appropriately done, I mean, that's just foolish all around. But I'm just telling you the reality of it. It has worked for me multiple times, and I've been using them for years. So other than electrical, really, there's a lot of variables that go in there. I'm not an electrician, even though I'm very familiar with it, but I just can't advise due to the fact that I'm not, licensed in that field. So now, same thing with plumbing. Plumbing is just a tedious process. So we're going to kind of go in here to that question in regard to now top-offs. So as far as top-offs, if you're using, let's say, a 12-rack system. So if I remember the question right, you're talking about top-offs from the very top tank. And then basically, obviously, top-off is a way that you have some source of water coming in order to top off the dilution that took place within that specific ecosystem or whatever aquarium that you're using. I want to talk a little bit, since we're talking about top offs, the key differences between a auto top-off system and a continuous drip system is I hear more and more and more, and I think that there's a lot of confusion and there's major differences between the two. So an auto top-off system is, let's say you've diluted. Water has been diluted, or maybe you're even removing a portion of water once a day, twice a day. Maybe it's on a timer system. It can get quite complex. And the key differences between the two is you're not doing it on a continuous over a 24-hour time frame. I highly suggest, longevity-wise, the amount of variables that you see versus a continuous, and I've done both and I've tested both. In my experience, you have a lot less issues with consistency during a continuous drip. Let's say a half-gallon drip emitter, 1 gallon drip emitter per hour. You can do a quarter-gallon drip emitters. You can get them custom. You can order them. So there's a lot of options depending on your stocking load, how much water you're changing, that type of thing. So I'm not going to go into all of that. I've talked about it many different times on other live streams. So again, hopefully that makes sense. Basically, you might have something on timer. Maybe you're manually hitting the switch. So now you're topping off all of your systems. Now you need something. Chances are, if you're doing a top off and if you're doing it right, you should essentially have something in order to discharge that water. So maybe your system is tapped. Maybe it's drilled. Maybe it's using some type of basic PVC overflow. There's thousands of videos out there on how to do those. It really comes down to, I've done both. I have drilled and I have PVC overflows. I personally, instead of using the white PVC, you can use like a Krylon Fusion paint. In my experience, eventually certain fish, it just ends up flaking off. So what I prefer to use is I go to Home Depot in the irrigation department and I get the black piping is what I get. It's not going to be as rigid as like your Schedule 40 PVC, like your standard white PVC. That's a much cheaper. You can order black PVC. You're generally not going to be able to go in and get the appropriate one that you're wanting to use without special ordering it. So that's kind of a tip there for you. I don't think I ever did a specific video on it, but if you want something black that kind of just blends in and looks a little bit better and it's way more cost effective and you don't have to wait around to have something special ordered, and if you kind of just, like most of us, you kind of want it yesterday type of thing, just follow the same concepts from, like I said, 1,000 different videos out there on how to do PVC overflows. Just use that material versus getting like a Schedule 40 PVC and painting it. I mean, you can do it either way. And now if you're using a PVC style overflow system, something in order to get the water out, my number one recommendation with that, it's not 100% fail-proof, however, you're 98%, is get a, we also carry them on the website, so hashtag free plug, I guess, for myself, is they're the TomTom, they're the auto-dosing units. They're very, very good. I have several of them running on each one of our PVC overflows where the tank isn't drilled. So Angela is wondering, what is the best size tanks to start a fish room? My recommendation is a 20 long or a 40 breeder, depending on what species you're breeding. But 20 longs are one of my favorite layouts. If you can afford it, 33 longs or 40 long is also a very nice footprint. But 40 breeders, if I could afford it, I would probably do all 40 breeders, to be honest with you. It just takes up more real estate. The Fish Loft said, number one, multi-tank filtration, single system sump, or freshwater. Are you talking about filtration? Sponge filters all day long. Just because I know the amount of expense when you're on I'll just say 100% can guarantee it. It's going to happen. Disease will happen depending on, especially if you're breeding and you're keeping things for any prolonged period of time. Disease ultimately, eventually will break out. I've had it happen on central systems in trying to treat a 1,500 gallon or a 2,000 gallon full sump system. It works great when you're breeding certain species of fish because of the pheromones that are released within the water. Can also a lot of times inhibit breeding. That's why a lot of people do it. However, for me personally, I run everything individual. No more sumps, and I probably never will, to be honest with you. I know the amount of expense that can go into it. So if I had to choose one, it would be, and you guys can definitely check it out. I don't know why it's more people aren't using it. It's by far the most cost effective. I don't know if anybody, I'm sure there's videos out there. I don't really go searching. Usually if some idea comes to my mind, I'll test it for a while. And if I can put my stamp of approval on it, if I feel it's going to save people costs, I'll go ahead and upload it. But there may be other videos out there. Who knows? I don't really care either way. But it is a diaphragm style pump that's rated for 8 devices. It's less than $100 for that entire system. And I've ran almost 80 individual aquariums off from that one pump with no issues at all. And you guys can definitely check it out. I did a whole video designated to it. And to run basically, and keep in mind it's on a loop system. So I'm running 3 different fish rooms essentially off from that one. And it's the entire loop is about 100 feet from start all the way once it connects to finish, maybe 75 feet. I can't remember exactly. So that kind of gives you an idea. But the whole basis is the engineering concept that goes behind it. Really fine-tuning, playing with the back pressure of it and reducing it. So the amount of pressure when it comes out is basically the way it flows through there. And so instead of using like an 1.5-inch style pump or a 2-inch pump or 1 3/4 inches with like a blower, that type of thing, you're reducing it down to a 1/2 inch irrigation tube. And then you just use the tap fittings that go into the irrigation tube. So the entire thing I wanted to do on a budget because I know a lot of people are getting into fish rooms. And like I said, I don't know how many people are using it. I don't know why more people don't use it. But you're getting essentially the same exact benefits from that is what you would by spending $300 or $500 on, a very expensive pump. Obviously, I know that businesses or suppliers of those pumps probably aren't too fond of the idea because if more people jumped on the bandwagon, obviously they probably won't be selling as many of those larger pumps. But yeah, let's see. Heather's wondering how big the fish rooms are and about how many tanks do you have. Well, we got about 80 tanks running active. I've have a lot of those I don't include. I have many more tanks than that aren't active, but we're close to 75 or 80. I haven't done a full count because I've been kind of downsizing, upsizing to a little bit larger systems, that type of thing. So as far as the one fish room in off to the right of me, that one is roughly about 20 by 15, so 20 feet by 15 feet. And then the smallest fish room where it all started, that is 10 by 10. And then our family room, which I really don't count as a fish room. Some people would. That is part of the loop system, though. And obviously our family room, I really won't count that as a fish room. Those are our display tanks. And that's roughly about 20 by 18. It's the pump I'm getting. Thank you for the tip, Jeremy. You're welcome, Mimi. And the main thing with that system is to manipulate the back pressure just raise up your even if you're using a weighted base sponge, just move it up closer to the surface. Get yourself a air control flow valve on each one of those, and then you can fine tune it because the amount of back pressure and depending on where the system's at, you're just going to have to fine tune it, play around with it. But if you notice with really any pump, you have it too far down in the amount of back pressure, depending on what the pump is rated, just simply manipulate it by raising it up closer to the surface. And then what you can do is you can actually, instead of even using a clamp, the fittings that go in there are pretty solid once you use just your standard 1/4-inch airline tube. Just cut it to the height that you need and then go maybe an inch or two below that in order for dilution to kind of play. And what that will help do is that kind of disrupts the surface. Now, as far as your overall beneficial bacteria, by having it at the base or more towards the surface, it's really not going to matter. I mean, you guys are keeping up with your maintenance and all of that stuff anyways. I mean, most people have their sponge filters towards the bottom in order to kind of recirculate things and all of that. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to matter either way. 80 big shot, Priscilla said. Actually, if at this point I'm too invested into it, but if it was me, I would stick with, I'll put it to you this way. I can guarantee you I will be more effective with my 10x10 fish room with 30 or 40 tanks than I would with the 2 fish rooms with 80 tanks. I could do way more breeding projects. I could save a lot of cost. I would focus more of my attention on breeding projects because it would be in one space rather than being dispersed all throughout. It would be way more organized and just overall more efficient. Because I'm bringing in now, not importing, but because sometimes I bring in and I try to support other hobbyists as far as rehoming, that type of thing. So now that's why I have other systems. Same thing with quarantine. It's do I shut the one down and just maintain the other one? I've thought about it before, but like I said, because of the basis behind what I'm doing at this point in the hobby now, I'm just going to keep what I have. Then I have the amount of space I need to introduce things and move things around. But yeah, I mean, having everything in one room from a breeding standpoint, way more effective and way more efficient. You don't need 100 tanks to be effective when it comes to breeding. You really don't. All right, you guys. So to reach at that point in the night, I want to thank you guys. Thank you, everyone, for the super chats. Like I said, if you're not following over on Facebook, simply head on over there. Just put in Sergeant Tank. You'll see our logo pop up. Answer the 3 questions if you're not part of it. And either myself, one of the moderators, will go ahead and approve you guys. And with that being said, you guys, make it a great rest of your night. And we'll talk to you on the next one.